Thank you, Diane. Good morning. I'm Kristen McIntyre, and I'll be serving as today's service coordinator. And Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley will be providing today's reflection on the edge of something new. Before we begin, we'd like to start with a few announcements. There are lots of things going on at North Chapel. Thanks. Working on the selfie angle, so thank you. So please read in your order of service about them. There will be a meeting for newer members next week after the service, where the heads of our committees will be talking about the work that each committee does. So if you'd like to join, and we hope you will, please speak to Ann Winia so we can plan appropriately. Are there any other announcements? Okay. Bree, thank you so much for volunteering this morning, and children will be going downstairs for SE with Bree. Thanks. If you're new to North Chapel, welcome. And if you're visiting, please consider signing the guest book at the back of the sanctuary. After today's service, we'll have a coffee hour downstairs, and we invite everyone to come down and visit. And finally, if you haven't done so already, please turn off your cell phone or put it in silent mode to keep it from ringing and dinging during the service. We will begin with our in-gathering song, hymn number 70. I'm so grateful to gather here on Sunday mornings with this community. It provides a foundation to our daily lives and also connects us to something so much bigger. And it makes my life here in Woodstock and the lives of my girls so much richer. So I wanted to share these words on gathering that I found in UU materials. We gather. We gather, we bring our sorrows, our disappointments, our failures. We gather for healing, for laughter, and to rejoice. We gather to find new ways of loving, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. We gather, yes, always we gather, for it is in gathering that we find our hope.
Good morning and good Sunday. Does anybody recognize the picture on the cover of the orders of service? It's the view from the south of a rock called East Rock on Star Island. And it is the place where I've seen sunrises over the ocean many, many, many times. And a dear friend of mine is here from Star Island. I didn't know she was going to be here today, but it's good to see you. You will come back. It's interesting to think about sunrise and the idea of standing on the edge of something new. But I want to start in a very different place. Just about every truth I knew began to take new shape right there at the end of everything. It's ironic. 2 times it's happened to me that I've told a story and gotten a strange response. The first story I told was about the one brief moment above her that changed the way that I saw the world. I thought of myself not even as a sparrow of a man, driving across the American continent for the 3rd time, bound once again for glory, hopes and dreams, and Northern California, with my hatchback loaded to the gills and my brand new Gary Fisher bicycle strapped to the roof of my car. I was as packed as I could handle. I was driving out with 2 friends of mine, Erica Reed Greeley, who's a dear friend from Star Island, and Nick Molander. Erica is filled with grace. Nick is brazen and fantastic, coming back to the island at the end of season when there's no one else on the island except the workers. It was Nick who would arrive at the very prow of the boat, pointing his way forward, naked as the day he was born. It's important to be passionately embodied. So the 3 of us were driving out west, and we drove for 11 hours when we were in Colorado until we stopped somewhere in the Rockies. We were looking for a good night's rest, and we sure found it. The night air was thin and crisp. The earth was parched. I started a fire and camped out beneath the starry constellations, beneath heaven and beneath the man in the moon. I slept well, with my face against the sky, but I woke before the morning and I could not go back to sleep. It was a blessing even though I didn't know it. So I climbed out of my sleeping bag and I unlashed my bicycle and took off riding into the darkness, confident that that would dissipate into the morning. There was barely enough light to see, but I knew that I was heading west. I rode off into the darkness with the sunrise at my back. The first climb was easy despite the cold and despite the darkness and despite the thinness of the air. But I paused for a moment at the peak to see, but it was still too dark to recognize much of anything. Down into the valley, into the next valley, I went anyway, devil may care, flying with both wheels on the ground. The downhill run was fast and surprisingly cold. I was 2 layers underdressed. I kept riding. The second climb was more challenging, and I was already in the lowest gear. I just kept cranking down the gear shift anyway, more out of habit than out of hope. I was struggling to make it up the mountain, muscling the bike. I was trying too hard, and that's when, everybody knows, that's when you get hurt. A foot slips off the pedal, a tire gets caught in the rut of the road. I couldn't afford the injury, so I dismounted. And I started walking the bike up to the top of the peak to see what I could see. And that's when the miracle happened. The sun must have risen enough for the morning because the whole mountain range was bathed in a tender young light. It seemed like morning even though the sun had not risen yet. It was after I turned back west that it actually happened. When I first saw her, I was about 10 feet below the peak of the mountain, but I could see it right there on the road. And that's when I saw that her underbelly grazed the top of the mountain at its peak and left there a single feather. She was Christ-like at the top of the Western world, wings outstretched, open-breasted, vulnerable, defiantly exposed, like a mother. She folded her wings at angles to gather speed and to control her descent. And as she was preparing to cut a path over the valley, she noticed me. I was far too close when she first saw me. For her surprise, the air seemed to get cold and strangely still. Everything, even time, seemed to move a bit more slowly. Adrenaline. There was a bitter taste in my mouth. Her head turned slightly to the left, and she locked her gaze on me. She fixed her eyes so sharply, so tightly that it nearly dropped me to my knees. She was riveting, she was beautiful, she was fantastic, and she had had time enough to draw her talons, but for some reason she chose not to. I don't know why. The movement of the air returned. Time sped up to a normal pace. She turned away, leaving me breathless, and she dove down into the valley through the morning. And I watched her fly until she disappeared, swallowed in the wash of orange light. She flew beyond the circle of my seeing, and she broke the sky. Sunbeam arcs broke free over the mountains. They broke through my eyes, and they tore through my heart with considerable violence, and I was grateful. I stood there near the peak of the mountain for a while, just staring into the valley, my mind's eye replaying her flight like a good love story. The image that stained my memory was looking down upon her, looking down upon the wingspan of a God-gift golden eagle in perfect flight. That one brief moment above her changed the way I saw the world. At Star Island, I offered that story as part of a worship service. And afterwards, someone asked me the strangest question. They said, "Why were you talking during this evening's chapel so much about the subject of death?" I said I wasn't talking about the subject of death, but that's what she heard. That's what she heard. So we talked about that for a while. I don't know what it is with me, something that I cannot identify, a penchant for the dramatic maybe, a habit of pushing myself to unlikely extremes. I don't know what it is, but it's something. Twice now this has happened to me. The first time was in Colorado in the 1990s. The second time was just recently in California. I was on sabbatical. Both times this happened, I was far out west, at the American Divide or farther. Maybe it's something about the energy of that land. Have you ever been to the Pacific Ocean? No? Or have you ever seen the Shawshank Redemption? Same question, actually. It might seem like a strange couple of questions, but they're related. Just a show of hands, Pacific Ocean people and Shawshank Redemption people. Okay. You get a prize, I think. The Shawshank Redemption, for those of you who may not know, was a film in the 1990s starring Morgan Freeman, Tim Robbins, and a host of other supporting actors. Tim Robbins plays the part of a wealthy banker named Andy Dufresne, who was falsely blamed for the murder of his wife, who was cheating on him at the time. Andy was angry, and he drank himself senseless, and he loaded a pistol, and he wanted to kill, but he decided against it on that day, on the very day that she was killed by someone else. Of course, when he told his truth in court, no one believed him. He came off looking like a heartless, calculating man who was unaware of the failings of his own marriage. He was imprisoned. He was stuck. Obviously, and on the inside of the prison, he met a man named Red, character played by Morgan Freeman. Asked why he was called Red, Morgan Freeman responded with saying, "Maybe I'm Irish." Red was a player, he was a smuggler, he was a businessman, and within reason, he could get his fellow inmates almost anything that they desired. A decent bag of potato chips, a carton of your favorite cigarettes, family photographs, whiskey on occasion. When Red asked Andy what he wanted, Andy surprised him a little bit. He said that he wanted three specific things. He wanted a rock hammer, which is like a carving knife. It's used for the shaping of stones. Andy wanted to make himself a chess set. Andy also wanted Rita Hayworth, the famous actor from the 1940s. The idea of getting Rita Hayworth did not surprise Red so much, although he said that that would take him a little bit of time. The truly surprising thing that Andy wanted Red to smuggle into the prison wasn't a carving knife and it wasn't Rita Hayworth. which was really just a poster, as it turns out. What Andy wanted that surprised Red was hope. Andy wanted Red to smuggle hope into Shawshank Prison. Red didn't know if he could do it. Hope is dangerous. It's a dangerous thing in the world these days. Do you believe in hope? When I saw that bird in Colorado, it made me believe in hope in a new way. I had grown used to being cynical and harsh and dark, not inaccurate, but cynical and harsh. And when I saw something that was more beautiful than my eyes could accept, I visited hope again in a new way, unafraid to feel foolish for the embrace of it. Hope is dangerous in the world these days. In fact, it just may be that the only thing more dangerous than hope these days is hopelessness. So, do you think that Red was able to smuggle hope into Shawshank Prison? More importantly, do you believe that hope is dangerous these days? Red thought that hope was dangerous. Andy Dufresne didn't. In prison, you trade on anything you can. Andy Dufresne, the former banker, knew how to manage money. So he traded on that. He would do the warden's taxes. He would do the taxes for a bunch of the prison guards. He was well-liked, and he enjoyed certain privileges. One of those privileges was the privilege of access. Andy was in and out of the warden's office all the time. Once inside the warden's office, one had access to a PA system, a public address system. One could make a public announcement and reach all of the inmates at once. Now, Andy had been trying to improve the lives of his fellow inmates for some time. He had begun building a prison library with donations gathered from the neighboring communities. Packages would come in irregularly, a little bit there, a little bit more here. On one particular day, in came an opera by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. It arrived. Is that right? Who wrote Marriage of Figaro? Was that Mozart? Okay. And it was Marriage of Figaro that arrived. As it happens, that same day, Andy had exclusive access to the warden's office. So when no one was looking, when the coast was clear, Andy locked himself in and he played the opera on the warden's stereo, and he broadcast it to every corner of Shawshank Prison. In a language that few, if any, prisoners could understand, they all heard two women singing a soaring melody that translates as, "How sweet the breeze will be this evening in the grove of the pines." Susanna and the Countess were planning on playing a trick on the king. And despite the language barrier, something fantastic happened. Something that looked like hope. Red knew it, and Andy knew it, and the prison guards knew it as well. That was why, for Andy, there would be hell to pay. Reflecting on that experience years later, certain things stay with you over time. Red shared his thoughts in a soliloquy as a narration in the film. Red said, "I have no idea to this day what those two Italian ladies were singing about. The truth is, I don't want to know. Some things are best left unsaid. I'd like to think that they were singing about something so beautiful that it cannot be expressed in words. Something that makes your heart ache because of it. And I tell you that those voices soared higher and farther than anybody in that gray place dares to dream. It was like some beautiful bird had flapped into our drab little cage and made those walls dissolve away. And for the briefest of moments, every last man at Shawshank felt free." Andy was punished for this. Solitary confinement. Andy had to spend 2 weeks in the hole because of what he did. And when he got out, he received a hero's welcome from his inmates. "Look who's here," they said. They called him Maestro after this. When he returned, one of them, Floyd, I think, asked him why he couldn't play something good like Hank Williams. Andy responded and he said, "They broke the door down before I could take requests." Then he spoke about his punishment. He said that the time in the hole was easy time, and truly none of his other inmates understood him. They better understood the two women who were singing opera in Italian. Then Andy explained. He said, "I had Mozart to keep me company." And Floyd said, "They let you tote that record player into the prison cell?" And he said, "No, it was here." And Andy gestured to his mind. And he said, "And it was in here." And Andy gestured to his heart. And he said, "That's the beauty of music. They can't take it away from you." Haven't you ever felt that way about music? You need it so that you won't forget. So that you won't forget that there are places in the world that aren't made out of stone. And that there's something inside that they can't touch, that's yours. "What are you talking about?" Red asked. "Hope," Andy responded. "Hope?" Red asked. "Let me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a good man insane, and it's of no use inside. You'd better get used to that idea." When I was in California, towards the end of my time there, knowing that I was coming back to Vermont, in some ways changed by that experience, not knowing what that change means, just as an aside, I want to say thank you to this community because I came back not really knowing my name, not really knowing most anyone's name. I had forgotten. I went to a place in New Orleans for 7 weeks, and I knew no one in New Orleans. And then I went to a place in California where I have a second family, and I'm incredibly familiar with that area of the land. And I came back to Vermont, drove to my house, got into the kitchen, and I looked around, and my first thought was, I'm so psyched. Whoever's letting me stay in this house has all the same stuff I have. But before I left California, which was the opposite side of our country from the picture on the cover of your order of service, I walked out to the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific was Andy Dufresne's dream place. When he was in prison, he was only thinking about the Pacific Ocean. He wanted to go there because of a myth that he had heard. He heard that the Pacific Ocean has no memory. And he wanted to go there to forget what he'd gone through. And I went there because, having been working on a book that I'll tell you about over time, I had reached the very end of my ability to go further with that book. So I went to the ocean, kind of psyched to be able to put this big project down, having answered the call that I've received from Points Beyond, from Great Spirit, or from Bruce Springsteen. I struggle knowing where my inspiration comes from sometimes. But I stood before that ocean and I said, "Dear God, I've done the best that I can do, and I've gone as far as I can go. The rest is up to you. Thank you for guiding me on this adventure." And right away, my Facebook friends responded by saying, "If you were thinking of doing something drastic, Leon, call me first." 2 times now, I had a spectacular experience that was received as something more desperate. I quickly amended my Facebook post so that it would read, "Dear God, I've done the best that I can do. I've gone as far as I can go. The rest is up to you. Thank you for guiding me on this sabbatical adventure. Always yours. Deep and joyful times at the beach in San Francisco." In your order of service is a little homework assignment. From a book called Unitarians Face a New Age from 1936. It was a compilation, a report delivered by the Commission on Appraisal, and the committee members are listed on one side, are some of the religious principles that we went over last week. I want to give them out to you because I want to make sure that we know that this is a living tradition. We are a theology in motion. These things that are listed from the most popular responses in 1936, which was the free exercise of intelligence and religion, which received 100% affirmation, and to the least well-received idea, which is at the bottom of the page, the sense of forgiveness of sins in consequence of prayers of confession, or petitionary prayer just above it, which came in at 34 and 30% of us. Although we may narrow our ideas of what is important for us religiously, all of these things are aspects of us, and all of these things live within us. Let us not make of our faith a gray and confining space into which a wild bird must fly to make us remember to hope. I ask you to think about these ideas this week, especially when you're listening to the news, especially when you're listening to what's going on in the Sudan, especially when you're listening to things that are going on in Israel and Gaza. And ask yourselves, let us ask ourselves, which of these principles is most useful in response to the crisis of our time? Over the course of this coming week, I'm going to be meeting with at least one member of our community to talk about what this means for us moving forward. One great gift of being on sabbatical is that I was not weekly in this pulpit expressing my great outrage at what is unfolding. We have an opportunity now to sort of reflect on it. So over the course of this week, if you are so moved, please write me a note if you want to. And you can send that to my email address, even though I have great problems with email. Or you can call me on the phone and tell me what you're feeling. Maybe next week or in the weeks to come, I'd love to plan a session afterwards when we can talk about what might be weighing on our hearts and how our faith might be of service in the relief of that weight. For now, let's do what Andy Dufresne did. Let's grab a little rock hammer and a distracting poster that will hide our efforts. And let's slowly chip away at whatever walls might be imprisoning us. And when we break free, let's wash ourselves in the river of redemption and go to a wide open space. It doesn't need to be the Pacific. And leave behind what we don't need to remember. And hold dear to that which is most important and most high. Being able to see the truth and the beauty and the holy in each and every one of us is the source of hope, not the cause of hope, but the source of it. If we want hope, let's look into one another's eyes, and there we will surely find it. The hymn that was chosen for today is one of my favorites. Seek not afar for beauty, though it glows in the dew-wet grasses that are all about your feet, in birds, in sunshine, childish, spacious, sweet, in stars, and in mountain summits topped with snows. May we move forward in grace and in gratitude as we muscle our way forward with freshness, newness, extremity, and hope, even in a dark time. May we find a way to leave behind what we need to leave behind and stand on the very edge of something new. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.